After another lively night of AFC action here on Fox, we're going to switch the focus to Europe with a JD show where the focus is very much on the Champions League, specifically with a look at the prospects of England's representatives. So here's what I'll be putting out there tonight. Liverpool are through. Spurs can follow as they aim to show that they can compete with Europe's big boys. Meanwhile, with City strolling the Premier League, thank goodness for this good old rivalry keeping things interesting. And I'll be running my eye over some of the transfer stories doing the rounds in this week's Buzz, which once again will be put together by Yvette King, who's of course also tasked with getting your take on our talking points. Hi Yvette, I've got to say our mailbox has been bulging lately.
That it has? Well, let's carry on. And speaking of lasting, can Liverpool and Spurs hold their own against the big boys of Europe? And it's top four crunch time. Who will end up with the bragging rights in the clash between Liverpool and Man United at Old Trafford this weekend? Finally, are Alexis Sanchez and Paul Pogba pulling their weight for United? Tell us everything on Facebook Live. But first, John, let's chat Champions League.
Of the European variety, I think we should probably stress at this stage. So that's where we're going to be going, towards the Champions League. Let's kick things off then with the results from last night. 2 of the 8 quarter-final places have been filled by Liverpool, who were able to leave Salah and Van Dijk out from the start as they got the job finished against Porto, a 0-0, ensuring that 5-0 aggregate, while Real Madrid showed their true class against PSG, who tried everything to unsettle the champions but ended up very much second best in that 5-2 aggregate drubbing. Right, let's focus on Liverpool to start with, as seen by the newspapers, reflecting on the professionalism really of Jurgen Klopp's team as they ground out a 0-0 before turning their thoughts to the later rounds of the competition. And here it comes, because it's everybody should fear them if we look at more headlines. Jurgen Klopp, they will be trouble. Klopp saying that Liverpool are back where they belong, acknowledging the next round will be very difficult. Now, I've heard 2 guests on this show already, Russ Wiseman and John Wilkinson, tip Liverpool to win the Champions League this season. And I've got to say, they're peaking at precisely the right time. Now, let me bring a journalistic perspective to this as I welcome James Robson of the Manchester Evening News. James, thanks very much for joining us here. Now, obviously, we're going to talk about Liverpool later in the context of this weekend's crunch clash with Manchester United. And, of course, I suppose they could also meet again in European competition. But for now, give me your take on how things seem to be coming together just right for Liverpool right now. Could you see them winning Europe's top prize?
Well, they won in 2005, didn't they? And if I'm totally honest, I did not see them winning it then. So I think this team is comparable with that, if not better. The forward line is among the best in Europe. You've got to say that, haven't you? I was at the game against City in January when they were just spectacular, and I've not seen anyone do that to City. And City right now, you would say they're certainly the best team in the country. Probably one of the best teams in Europe, and Liverpool tore them apart. So if they can do that to City, then you would say they can do it to most teams.
Now, that, of course, is the argument most people are advancing. Just stick around, James, because I'm going to point out that the biggest obstacle to any English team winning this thing is, of course, a former Manchester United player, Cristiano Ronaldo. He was at it again, as I said, in Paris last night. Really stunning. Now, scoring yet again in this season's competition, setting Real on their way against the PSG side that really wilted under the pressure. Real might have had a few problems this season, but any team containing Ronaldo has got to be in with a chance of winning any tournament it enters. I've got some stats for you before I get James's take on this one. 117 goals this season. He's got 12 in 8. Now, how about this? Since 2009, Cristiano Ronaldo has scored 102 Champions League goals. Manchester United and City have scored 98 each. Okay, they haven't always been in it, but that's just daft. Top scorer in this competition for the last 5 seasons. And I think, James, you've got to say, haven't you, really, that he might only have the same number of medals as Lionel Messi, but surely he's got to be this competition's most prolific player. And if you want to get past him, it takes some doing, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You run out of things to say about him. Those stats you've just shown there, again, just show what a spectacular player he is. I think we'll miss him when he's gone, but despite what I keep hearing, I haven't got my eyes on him every week because I'm watching football in this country, but all you seem to hear, all you've heard really for the last 3 years or so, is how Ronaldo is a fading force, how he's going away. And yet every time I see him, he seems to be scoring big goals, big games, winning big trophies. For me, there is no better player on the big stage to win a match winner on the big stage. In the first leg against PSG, he probably didn't have his best game. Still scored 2 goals, effectively tied up that tie in the first leg. Scored the key goal last night. He's spectacular. He's one of the the greatest players of all time.
Yeah, and we're not going to get into a debate, him and Messi or anything like that. Let's just say that you've got to get past Ronaldo at the very least. Let's look ahead, James, right now to one of tonight's games. I only say one. I'm not going to bother with Manchester City. They're all but through against Basel already. Instead, I think this is genuinely the tie of the round. Really is. That Wembley clash between Spurs and last season's beaten finalist Juventus, locked up at 2-2 after Spurs come back in Turin last time out. Now, this represents the moment of truth for Mauricio Pochettino's side in so many ways here. In more ways than one, I'd say, because Pochettino himself says it's now time to prove that Spurs can compete with Europe's elite. Not just tonight. A bit like Liverpool right now, I'm thinking Spurs are going into this one with some real momentum. A lot's fallen into place for them. Yes, it'll be tough against Higuain, Dybala and company, but I'm not going to sit here and paint Spurs as plucky underdogs. No, I'm actually going to say they've come so far that you can't say, oh, defeat wouldn't matter, they've done well. I'm saying they should be looking to get through to the quarterfinals. James, do you agree with me? I think the evidence is here that they can and probably should win this if they've got anything about them.
Absolutely. They're one of the top teams in this country, which makes them one of the top teams in Europe. If that's the case, then you've got to be winning these games. What I would say about Spurs is that this has generally been the point when they've come unstuck. Around the point where you say, now prove it, now prove that you really are one of the elite. They tend to just disappoint. I wouldn't be surprised if Juventus snuck this one. I've got to be totally honest. If Spurs do win it, though, it'll be a major statement.
A major statement by English clubs as well. Right, stick around because we're going to get onto your specialist subject. That would be a Manchester-based club when we come back. But before we do that, let's get some thoughts from the viewers on the Champions League.
Yes, the comments are rolling in, and let's start with Wesley. He says, I feel that Liverpool has a better chance than Spurs in Europe, given the opportunity that they have more weapons in attack. An intimidating fortress in Anfield, which is magical on European nights, plus Klopp, while not a winner, but he has led Dortmund to the final before. And Atava says Liverpool are on a roll at the moment, exclamation mark ×3. Imagine what damage they could have done to teams if they hadn't sold Coutinho.
Exclamation mark ×4. Which is an interesting point, that one, because, you know, there's a school of thought out there that actually, without Coutinho, they've got a bit more fluidity, they've got more pace and options, and I don't know, I mean, the stats are telling us that they're pretty much comparable to when they had Coutinho there. Fact of the matter is that Oxlade-Chamberlain has stepped up. I spoke about this on the show the other day, and Liverpool have got the weapons, and that's a really good point. I think I like that point about what they've got to offer compared with, I mean, we've characterised Spurs as being a little bit Kane reliant, although Son Heung-min has stepped up recently and he's really delivering at the moment. But Liverpool certainly do have the firepower, and if I'm not mistaken, I saw something on Sky from the UK saying that Rio Ferdinand, even on the TV the other day, was suggesting that Liverpool might have enough. Rio Ferdinand, ex-Manchester United, Liverpool might have enough to win the Champions League. That's tantalising, particularly given what we're talking about next, which will be the Manchester United side of this weekend's big Premier League clash.
Large fixture coming up this weekend. With 38 league titles between them, it's fair to say Liverpool doing battle with Man United should be an entertaining one. But not just on the pitch, but off it too. Drama in the dugout as Mourinho and Klopp go head-to-head, and John's all over it. That's when we come back. Meanwhile, drop us your thoughts.
Hey, thanks for being with us tonight. Now, I'd like to focus on the top of the Premier League table, where we've barely got March up and running, and the Premier League title race is done and dusted. While the top four is beginning to solidify as Chelsea stumble from problem to problem. So here we are. City may well end up winning the league by 20-plus points, and Chelsea will be seriously stretched to make up a 5-point deficit over the remaining 9 games. So where's the entertainment to be found, I wonder? I'll tell you, Old Trafford. That's where. The when? Well, Saturday night. Whatever time you're watching this one around Asia, because Manchester United Liverpool games always count for something, a lot in fact, but this one might just help revive interest in the top of the table. Even if they only end up competing for second place, Saturday's clash should provide enough in the way of tribalism, rivalry and feuding to keep us engaged right through to the end of this season. Right now, United have a slight edge in terms of league placing and a distinct advantage when it comes to the recent head-to-head record, which could be a factor. It's always worth looking at these things. Only that Europa League tie in 2016 going Liverpool's way in the last 7 meetings might surprise you, that maybe given the nature of some of the performances by United, that explains some of those results. But it does make this weekend's game so compelling. The contrast as well, I think, in recent league and cup form between these two sides. United have been a hard watch at times lately, but typical of a Jose Mourinho side, they tend to get results and build a siege mentality along the way. Take the most recent Premier League victory, for instance. The newspapers going to town when Matic pops up and smashes one in at the end. Well, you're going to have fun with your headlines. The unlikely hero sealing that comeback from 2 down with his stunning long-range injury time strike, leaving United's fans delirious. And the press reporting, there's the Manchester Evening News, that Mourinho was in fact the key to the comeback with a blistering Sir Alex Ferguson-style half-time dressing room blast at his players. So it was a massive result in a number of ways, wasn't it? James is still with me. Talk to me about how that result came about. Now, when you've had to come back from such a poor position in a game, do you see it as a positive, or are there negatives attached to it?
Well, it's one of those, it created one of those memorable moments. Anyone who was there on the night, anyone who watched it, they will remember that. You can't forget it. But how do you get yourself in that position in the first place? United were dreadful in the first half, dreadful for the first 10, 15 minutes of the second half. Against a better team than Crystal Palace, they probably wouldn't have got away with that. But you can't disguise the jubilation when you do come back after what had been a horror show.
Yeah, the only problem with this, James, is anyone other than Mourinho, you might say he'll go, great, there we are, we're riding a crest of a wave, let's ride it all the way into the weekend's game. But there's a nagging voice at the back of your mind, isn't there, saying, he might just say, well, we got ourselves 2-0 down, can't let that happen again.
That's always the fear with him, isn't it? That whereas other people would say this is a return to the great Fergie days, the comeback days, Mourinho will say, how on earth do we end up 2-0 down? I think United fans can have a certain amount of hope, though, because he did mention that it was down to really sloppy defending, mistakes, perhaps rather than anything he did in terms of the way he set up his team on the day. It was a case of his players let him down. They made mistakes, uncharacteristic mistakes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, on the face of it, the home side should be riding a high into Saturday's game. But, you know, there are a surprising number of negative narratives surrounding Manchester United right now. For instance, January's big signing, Alexis Sanchez, pilloried for losing possession 19 times. We all have stats at our fingertips these days. That was the first half at Selhurst Park. And let's have a look at some of these tweets. This came from the Sun, who said Alexis Sanchez lost possession 34 times in all against Palace, but that wasn't even his worst performance of 2018. You follow the link to the article if you want to. The newspapers going to town really on the Chilean's poor form for Manchester United relative to his broader Premier League career. He does have his defenders, though. One of James's colleagues, Samuel Luckhurst, tweeting this rather reasoned defence of Sanchez, saying, yeah, he's yet to get going. His role is an issue. Some of the criticism last night was excessive. Ceded possession frequently, but endeavoured to make things happen from the off and played key roles in Lukaku and Matic's goals. I might take issue with that, when one guy was all about persistence, Lukaku, and the other was a blast from distance. However, I would say that there is a little bit to what Samuel's saying there. Look at these stats that I got from Planet Football's website here. Now, if you look through here, you can see that, yes, his goal and assist return is worse than it was at Arsenal earlier on this season when he was enduring a poor campaign. But I've got some other stats for you now, which see a different tale emerge. Right, so Sanchez is attempting more passes than he did. He's slightly more accurate with them, but he's attempting fewer key passes for some reason. He's dribbling much more at United, but he does tend to be dispossessed more often, which is obviously what we saw. He does have more defensive responsibilities under Mourinho, and he's making more tackles. What I would say from all of that is that I think Sanchez is forcing it a bit, and maybe both him and his manager are still trying to find the ideal role for him at United. James, do you agree with me on this one? And is it turning into a problem? Is he getting in the way in more ways than one?
I absolutely agree with you on the forcing it. I think watching him the other night, it felt a little bit like Rooney towards the end at United, where he was herring about all over the pitch, trying to get involved, trying to be important to the side, but not actually having that much of an effect on it. So it's almost like having a touch for the sake of it, where you want Sanchez to be in those key areas, making the difference. Maybe I'd imagine Mourinho appreciates the effort, but that's not really what you signed him for. You signed him to be the difference in the big games. We've not seen that yet. His best game was against Yeovil. And that's not what you pay all that money for.
No, not really. What a start that was. It was always going to be tricky, wasn't it? A couple of goals against Yeovil and only one Premier League goal subsequently. What about Paul Pogba, James? This one interests me because I saw Anthony Martial has, with tremendous patriotism, called his teammate the best midfielder in the world. But of course, former Red Gary Neville gave a rather considered opinion on the French midfielder after the poor first half against Palace, and it was far less complimentary than Martial. You might have seen these quotes. He said Pogba's great strength is that he plays with freedom like he's playing on the park, but then he also said that it's his greatest weakness that he looks like he's playing on the park with his mates. This was the interesting part for me. Gary went on to say it's like everything he does is all for a YouTube or Instagram video. It's like it's not serious, like it's a joke to him. There's no wonder Mourinho left him out in recent weeks. Now, Neville illustrated his point with examples of Pogba's poor discipline when United didn't have the ball. So, James, this is really interesting to me because it's not like Sanchez. I mean, Pogba's been there a long time, and we all know about Jose Mourinho's defensive discipline and working without the ball. Heck, he spoke about it the other day, didn't he? So what happens next?
This is the key point. It could be the key to Mourinho's whole United tenure. He's got to get the best out of Paul Pogba. Now, I've spoken to people who coached Pogba when he was first at the club, and they describe him as he should be United's Iniesta. He's that good. But you've got to build a team around him, and I think that's the concern, because with Mourinho, he doesn't really build a team around one player. It's Mourinho's team, and you've got to fit into his team. Now, there's the rights and wrongs for both of those arguments. But if you pay £89 million on a player, if you make him the most expensive player in the world at the time, then you've got to make that player work. And right now, Mourinho just isn't getting the best out of him. I think it's notable. At the start of the season, I thought he was excellent. And I absolutely take Marshall's point that I think, in terms of his ability, he is one of the best in the world. But he should be United's Kevin De Bruyne. But you look at De Bruyne, he puts a shift in.
James, very quickly before you leave us, because we've got a few days to go yet, what is the one thing Mourinho will work on more than anything else ahead of the big game this weekend?
Not conceding.
Yeah, and we said exactly why that is earlier on in the wake of that first half against Palace. James, thank you so much. We're building up from a long distance out to the game this weekend, but you've played a big part in it. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So James Robson there of the Manchester Evening News. Now that's the state of play for United ahead of the weekend's big game. On Friday we'll be talking to the guys from the Anfield Wrap podcast to get their take on Liverpool's preparations. For now though, let's get to Yvette.
Yeah, we have a really juicy comment up here from Jason, who says he's not expecting Pogba to play like the player he was at Juventus simply because of the way Mourinho has set United up. And he says that we all know how Mourinho likes his team to be really solid defensive and not concede goals. Sanchez yet to find the best way for him to contribute to the team the way we know he can.
Yeah. I think we've spoken about Sanchez in some detail, and I think James was outstanding on describing what needs to happen with him. The Pogba one's interesting. When someone like Gary Neville makes the comment he does, I think it's because partly we see Pogba and Jesse Lingard to an extent so much on Instagram and everywhere doing things that we do sometimes think maybe they're more about the highlights reel and the clips than substantially taking hold of a game of football, as he said, like De Bruyne. Maybe that's what people are saying. You've got to run a game, Pogba. It doesn't matter where you're playing, Juventus or United.
That's it. It's not just all fun and games, is it? Okay, well, Subi says, I think again Mourinho is going to play defensive counter-attacking football against Liverpool as they did against Chelsea. A bit of parking the bus maybe. And Sean David Lowe says... Oh, no,
well,
we're going to
he's
jump to
predicting a Man United win. What does Rohit say?
He is, yeah. Liverpool can win the match versus United given that the team's chemistry is set. However, United have shown that they can hold off a team on high confidence except for City.
Now this is the thing, isn't it? As much as we might like to think, and you know, you'd say Mourinho going to Anfield is one thing, parking the bus and so on and so forth. Yeah, of course, his style of football is defensive counter-attacking football, so that's an assumption we make. At home, will they be any different? I tend to think not, particularly given the threat that Liverpool possess, but we'll think it over a bit more and come back with some more thoughts hopefully before we leave. Get those thoughts of yours in as well. Bit of transfer buzz up next.
Coming, who's going? Who's the hot name on everybody's lips? What's the buzz? Find out who, what, where and why with our transfer news coming right up. And don't forget to join in on the conversation. We want to hear from you on Facebook Live. Just a refresher, are Alexis Sanchez and Paul Pogba pulling their weight for United? We'll see you in the comments section.
Now it's that time of the show when we take a look at a few of the stories that have made it onto the Transfer Buzz section at the Fox Sports Asia website, but also try to do more than simply repeat a piece of news without actually analysing it to see if it's genuinely worth a click. So Yvette's going to serve them up for us on Transfer Buzz.
Well, John, the transfer rumours continue to buzz like bees around pollen, so let's dive straight into it. First up, a move that was mooted in the summer is back on. Yes, Liverpool are close to an agreement in principle to sign Monaco's Thomas Lemar. According to the Transfer Buzz, France's Le Ten Sport reported that the Reds have made good progress in talks with the French star, who will cost more than £88 million. Apparently, they were close last year. A move likely this summer, do you think, John?
It's an interesting one, this one, I think, Yvette, because I've been reading around that one. I think the asking price is around about 88 million, but I suspect that the actual price would be a little bit less than that. That's an awful lot of money, and the next thing you do is you look at the player and you look at what's going on here. Now, he's only scored 5 goals in some 27 appearances this season, and this is a player who was instrumental goal-wise in Monaco's triumph last time out. So I just wonder, value-wise, Liverpool fans will go, yeah, everyone wants this guy. If we get him tied up, he's a good player to have. I do wonder where he plays, though. But get him in first, get Cater in, and Liverpool suddenly look really strong to me.
Absolutely. Well, next up is a rumour that suggests a Premier League star is on his way out. Chelsea's brilliant Belgian is apparently stalling on a new deal in the hope for a move to Madrid. The Transfer Buzz has picked up on a story in the Daily Mail which suggests Eden Hazard is stalling on a new deal in the hope that his admirer and idol Zinedine Zidane comes a-calling. With Chelsea's future uncertain, it looks like it might be a possibility, would you say?
I don't know about this. I don't know if there's anything new to this whatsoever. Okay, I really don't know what there is about this. And in fact, I don't even understand Eden Hazard being quoted this way. But oh, hang on a minute. He wasn't quoted this way. It's all understand this and understand that. Eden Hazard is reportedly unhappy with the tactics used by Conte, i.e. having to play as a false nine. But then he comes out and says, we're better than Barcelona. Eden Hazard says, I'm happy in England. My family's happy in England. That's all that matters to me. And suddenly now, I don't know. I just think that this is a lot of smoke and mirrors and not a lot of substance, to be honest with you.
As always with all these transfer rumours. And finally, could one of Europe's most promising defenders be moving to England? Bayer Leverkusen's Jonathan Tah is supposedly being monitored by Tottenham's Maurizio Pochettino. As highlighted on the Transfer Buzz, the future of Toby Alderweireld is in doubt according to the Daily Mirror, and the German international could be the one to replace him. Big man, big prospect. Could he be Tottenham's long-term solution at centre-back, John?
He could be anybody's long-term solution at centre-back. You don't have to just be a fan of the Bundesliga here on Fox Sports Asia. You don't need to monitor this guy. I mean, this line about they're monitoring him. Everyone in world football knows about this guy. He's 22 years old. He plays like a veteran in terms of his positioning, his power. He puts in the crunchiest of most crunching tackles in that league, and his pace is simply extraordinary. He is, I think, really the next Boateng, if you will. He is sensational. Everybody would want him, and if you had him as an Alderweireld replacement, you'd have done pretty well replacing someone as good as Toby Alderweireld. So there we are then. That is it as far as transfer news, and we'll try and get a bit more feedback from the rest of the world right now. Yvette?
Lots of feedback indeed. People are getting a bit harsh. Roger Poo says Pogba is lousy, not worth a penny.
Oh my word.
Very harsh indeed. And Integi, well, he's really excited. He's looking for a Premier League classic, and he's dropping names like Alexis Sanchez, who suddenly bolstered Mourinho's attack, and also Romelu Lukaku, Paul Pogba, Jesse Lingard, those types of names.
Yeah, what's interesting about Integi there is, by the way, can I just go back? Roger Poo? Right? Listen, strong opinion. Probably get lots of those all-important likes and clicks. That's what it's all about. But I quite like somebody who makes a balanced argument like Ntege here. Ntege, you are a wonderful person because you aren't talking about parking buses. You're talking about a flair-filled Liverpool side full of all those attacking options we spoke about. But you see goals in Manchester United too. You see a classic around the corner this weekend. Let's hope you're right. There's a few days to come. Yvette, thank you very much for everything tonight. We will be back with more in terms of our build-up, particularly from the Liverpool angle to that big game at the weekend on Friday. See you then. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.